Hello, everybody. I'm George from Ireland. Now, I better mention this about a year ago because I've known this for some time. But Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is suffering from Parkinson's. I'm not absolutely certain of that, but I've heard it from numerous sources, and yet again today, I've heard from someone who would know in Moscow that this is the case. And for over 20 years, Putin's been noted for that strange walk, that gunslinger's sort of twisted walk. Is it swagger? Is he trying to project machismo because he suffers some crushing sense of inadequacy, which explains so much of his behavior of trying to terrify people and throw his weight around? It could be that. But anyway, as I say, it could be a symptom that he was going to get Parkinson's and indeed is suffering from it. He's aged visibly over the last few years. I mean, more so than one would expect with the march of time. He's going to be 70 at the end of October. So for him, Ukraine is an issue that's separated since the 90s. And he's been fighting this low-intensity war in Ukraine for 8 years, and he's not achieved what he wanted. Nobody's recognized Crimea as part of Russia. Hello there, Flash Errol. And the sanctions have hurt Russia significantly, lost at least billion dollars over 8 years. Not that much considering Russia's size. 13,000 people killed, only about half of them Russian, and not achieved its goals. And Ukraine is not coming back. And NATO has not bowed down, has not said that Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO, and so on. So he'd like to resolve this once and for all. Which is why he's sort of an old man in a hurry, if you will. But the thing is, Parkinson's will leave him mentally unimpaired, but increasingly unable to move. Presumably he's on an extensive cocktail of drugs for this, which now that might be affecting his mood. But he was so enervated in that live television oration yesternight. He's finally said that he has sent Russian troops into Luhansk and Donbass. Of course, they've been there for 8 years. He hasn't told the truth about the fact they've already been there, but he is at least telling the truth now that he's sending some more in now. He's broken international law in a very grave manner by recognizing the Luhansk and Donbass, these renegade regions of Ukraine. Indeed, Russia only controls about a third of the Luhansk region, a third of the Donbass region, or Donetsk region, you can call it. Does that mean he's going to try and claim the other two-thirds, which are under Ukrainian control? For the moment, the Duma's chair of the Foreign Relations Committee says no, but we shall see. So because obviously the Russian government breaks its word again and again and again. So he's ripped up the Minsk agreement. He's in flagrant breach of that yet again. Remember the Budapest Agreement in 1994 when Russia, together with the United Kingdom and the United States, they vowed to recognize Ukraine's territorial integrity and independence, and now Moscow's breaking that yet again. Russia's saying that Ukraine has no history of statehood. Well, lie. It's certainly been a sovereign state for 31 years. Why on earth does Russia have an embassy there? And I know it might be questionable whether Ukraine existed long before that, but it most certainly exists now. I'll tell you what has absolutely no history of statehood. That's Luhansk. That's Donbass. So there he is, Putin being a flagrant hypocrite yet again, saying, oh, well, we have spiritual, historical, cultural ties to Ukraine. Right, and that gives you absolutely no right to invade Ukraine. Ukraine is a sovereign state. I mean, if Ukraine has those ties to Russia, does Ukraine get to invade Russia? I don't think so. Germany can make the same argument about Kaliningrad, formerly Königsberg. Poland can make the same argument about half of Belarus, and on and on. These are the international borders which you vowed to exist. Ukraine was the second biggest nuclear weapon state in the world. In 1994, it gave away its nuclear arsenal for free in return for these guarantees from Russia. Well, they must be kicking themselves, what fools they were to trust in Russian good faith. So Putin had three options. He could have gone for full-scale war. He could have gone for this middle option, some land grab, or he could have backed down completely. The latter would have been too much of a humiliation. Proper war would have been too costly, the pushback would have been too great. Now he thinks that NATO will fall out amongst itself, quarrelling, already somewhat working. They're squabbling about what measures to impose, but the ruble has been hit, inflation has increased even more, and it's been a constant battle for several years to keep that under control, with rate cuts and rate rises all the time. He gave these utterly moronic reasons why he should invade Ukraine. Oh, a lot of doctors have left Ukraine. Right, so your answer is to kill more people? How's that going to bring more doctors? They want to work in more prosperous places. or, there's serious corruption in Ukraine. Yeah, which is true, but Russia's even worse. How is a war ever going to make corruption less severe? And so on. Saying there's genocide in Ukraine, that's a massive story, Vlad. Who's been killed? Like, name them, or numbers, and when, and where, and by whom, and what's your proof? No corroborating details at all. Yet another flagrant lie. So, wow, it was also projection, because his own armed forces have killed huge numbers of civilians in Chechnya, not so far as I'm aware in Ukraine. So anyway, the United States has got put blocking sanctions on VEB, that Russian bank, saying it's a military bank. So far, the United States has fought shy of cutting Russia off from SWIFT. Probably Western countries be far too feeble. SWIFT, that international payment system, they haven't blocked Russia from using the dollar. They could do a lot more. I mean, supposedly there's the first tranche of sanctions that could prevent them selling microchips, which a lot of Russian companies rely on, like Aeroflot and so on. Russia could get not such good microchips from China, and so on. So Russia's already said they're going to establish diplomatic ties to Luhansk and Donbass, some sort of embassy. Of course, Russia has previous on this, having recognized Abkhazia and South Ossetia, breakaways from Georgia, letting them set up embassies in Moscow. Russia's the only country in the world to be illegally occupying the territory of 3 other sovereign states, Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. You might say, what about Israel? Well, it occupies a tiny bit of Lebanon, a tiny bit of Syria, but also Palestine. But the trouble is, Palestine's not recognized by that many countries in the world. Anyway, so yes, it's an illegal act. It's a blatant breach of the law of nations. And he didn't go for a full-scale war, partly because they hadn't been able to drum up that much enthusiasm, would have hit his popularity. So anyway, Russia seems to be pulling out its diplomats out of Kiev. Are they going to break off diplomatic relations, saying it's been a consulate attack? Has it? A single one? I mean, I don't know. Certainly no physical attack. None have been physically harmed. And much though I despise Putin's tyrannical regime, I wouldn't countenance any physical attack on any Russian diplomat or property or vandalizing cars or anything. You don't do that, no matter what. Anyway, so that's it's all quite shocking. But not unanticipated. Remember, I forecast this just days ago. So the United Kingdom is introducing new sanctions on various Russian banks and oligarchs. The Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, says the Golden Visa scheme will be scrapped, which I think is imbecilic. If you pay billions of pounds, you could quite quickly get permanent residence in the UK. I think we should keep it. So long as they're not linked to the Kremlin, I would let people come. We don't want to punish the innocent as well as the guilty. So anyway, the UK is sanctioning various Russian banks, Rossiya, IG Bank, General Bank, Promsvyazbank, and Black Sea Bank. And they're going to freeze various assets, ban various Kremlin-linked billionaires from coming in, Timoshenko, Rotenberg, Boris, and Igor, that is. So there we are. Germany said that North Sea, Nord Stream 2 pipeline is not going ahead. Now, Putin might think, well, he can turn off the heating in Eastern Europe in winter. It's only about a month to go of winter. But yes, oil prices, gas prices are high. But I mean, I think he's been moronic. He's really damaged himself, and he'd already achieved his goal of Ukraine never joining NATO. So where do we go from here? He maybe thinks he can negotiate. He can give some of this back in return from concessions in other areas. But we shall see. Maybe slightly painted himself into a corner. Belarus is the only country spoken up for what he's done. China has obfuscated, saying, well, there are many factors behind this situation. So there we go. I'm glad at least a full-scale war has been averted for the moment. That may yet come. Biden said he's willing to meet Putin. Putin's spokesman Boris Peskov said it would be inapt to do so at the moment. This is premature. Anyway, a lot of it's quite dispiriting, but I mean, at least so far, hardly anybody's been killed. A bit of shelling across the border. But yeah, it might yet get worse. So, well, it's despicable what Putin has done. This completely unnecessary, unprovoked, aggressive act, interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. It's contemptible, and he's not gaining anything for his country. His country doesn't need this, actually. Right, that's enough from me. Toodaloo.